Okay. This evening's discussion for the work session is going to be from the RAG committee. And I'd like to thank all the individuals that were involved in that. Mr. James Raymond, Mr. Greg Stonecipher, Mr. Rob Robinson, John Gator, Mr. John Gator, and then Miss Lisa Cholet and Miss Sophia Moore. I don't believe they were able to make it here this evening. So you guys prepared a presentation for us to discuss a proposed rate structure based off of the roundtable. And you guys will have 30 minutes, roughly till 7 o'clock, to present on that. And we can all ask questions here and there. And then after that, they'll switch places with staff. Staff will come up and give us the presentation with Raptalis, and then we can ask questions directed to staff. How about it, gentlemen?
Okay, we got slides, we got slides. So the purpose of the RAG committee was to gather some community members, sit down, look at the existing rate structure, and try to come up with something that will be workable for all different types of residents based on usage. So that was our scope, what we were looking at. The process, 5 meetings here in this facility, and then we had 2 meetings outside of this facility on our own on a Saturday, which I think the second one was probably the most productive that we had. We had already had 4 meetings within this facility, and we were able to sit down without any time limits or restrictions and cut a lot of fat from the process. We also engaged with Raptalis for their view on past experiences dealing with towns and cities and how things would work and a good direction on where we needed to go. And once again, we focused just on a rate structure. And we looked at 3 or 4 different structures during this process. Once again, a lot of collaboration between all the group members. And then towards the end, we nailed it down to 2 and then a final 1. The guiding philosophy, once again, of something that works for everyone. I can tell you not everybody walked away with a happy, smiley face with the RAG committee, but I think we walked away respecting the view of the other members. We also felt that lower users should not stabilize higher end users. Pricing objectives, that was a challenge for us. A lot had to do with being cost effective across the board based on, once again, utilization of the water rates based on the different class of user, whether it was a large volume household, property with a larger surface area for outdoor irrigation. A lot of different things went into this cost structure. And I will tell you this, that the RAG members, we had 6 and we were split evenly, 3 with pot, 3 with non-pot. So we had a lot of different views on how to address this, but at the end of the day, it came down to the usage. And regardless if they were potable or non-potable. One thing that I personally did, because I took this committee near and dear to my heart, during the town's yard sale, we had the town-wide yard sale. I went to all of my members, all my neighbors, New York constituents in the Buffalo Creek area, which is non-pot, larger lots, more people inside, and got a good earful from the residents in Buffalo Creek on what they thought about the water rates and where they are today. And when we talk about water there, we don't talk about price, we talk about gallons. and how critical it is to the people over there. But we all had the same view, why are we in this situation? What can we do to change it? What is the town doing to change it? So there's a lot of constituents out there that would like to see some transparency from the town board, so they know what's coming down the pipeline if that's possible. So that was a big eye opener for me when I dealt with the residents and my neighbors in my community. Um, and the monthly bills, how they swing, do based on billing, whether it's 30 days billing cycle or 28 or 32. We talked about that during the RAG meetings, that there was a lot of inconsistencies there with meter readings and how the bills were invoiced, and how that had a direct impact on the final invoice that went to the customer. So they were hoping they could see some things change there, where they knew, well, we're going to have a 28-day cycle. It's going to be a 28-day cycle, not 32 or 34, depending on the month, right? So that's kind of like a 30,000-foot view. And I can go a lot deeper, a lot more granular if we need to. But I don't want to assume, I think the town understands this already. Hopefully I'm not mistaken with that on the feelings of the residents and the current water rate structure. So you want to roll into that then?
Yeah, before we dive into actual recommended structure, I'd like to go back a few slides. To the one entitled Guiding Philosophy. I just wanted to reemphasize a couple of things there that played really key into the rate structure we're recommending. So we wanted to make sure that there wasn't any significant cross-subsidization of one particular demographic with regards to water use, paying more than their fair share, and another demographic benefiting from that. And we dived pretty deeply, and when I say we asked Reftalis to dive pretty deeply into the data to look at some of that for us. And I want to thank Reftalis because we asked some things of them that I know they had not originally planned on doing, and they pivoted really well for us and gave us the data and the analysis that we asked for. We really tried hard to get to a point where the rates that people are going to be paying are actually reflective of the cost of providing the water that they are using and not anything else. Again, no cross-subsidization there. And again, a solution that works for everyone. I don't think there's not possibly a solution in the situation that the town finds itself in with water that everybody's going to be happy. There is no solution where we can reduce everyone's water rates. That's just not possible. We definitely recognize the need that we need to cover the actual cost of operating the water system. The total revenue collected from these rates needs to cover the full cost. That's just how it has to be. So if we want to jump ahead to the current rate structure, one other thing that we addressed that isn't apparent in these slides, I was on the previous committee as well, and one of the guiding philosophies there was a subsistence rate, kind of that lower end user who's not using much water. We wanted to make sure that they have the opportunity to save some money. And what we did in the previous committee is we rolled some guaranteed usage into the base of 3,000 gallons. And what we found when we looked at the data this time is we actually had the opposite effect of what we intended. Because we have customers who actually are using only 1,000 or 2,000 gallons. And the system that we set up in the previous rate structure, they're required to pay for 3,000 gallons, even if they're only using 1,000. So it's having the opposite effect of making water more affordable for those people and giving people an opportunity to save some money by conserving water. So one of the recommendations we're going to make is to actually remove that guaranteed roll in and reduce the base cost accordingly. So the base cost will be significantly lower. Everyone will pay for that first gallon of water they use, the first 1,000 gallons. But those who are only using 1,000 or 2,000 gallons are going to be still paying less, we believe, than the current base rate. So it's going to give people a larger opportunity to save money by reducing their costs. The other big thing that we heard as a committee, and that Jim brought as a very strong message, was that some of those users who are on the higher end are being inappropriately penalized. And I don't want to make that sound like we shouldn't have people who are using more water pay more. Although there was a lot of discussion around a flat rate that just has the same cost per 1,000 gallons regardless of usage. We got to an agreement where there does need to be some sort of tiered structure. But looking at the rates and looking at the history and the news stories and things like that, we felt like perhaps those tiered dials are turned up too high. And those higher end users, while they should pay more, perhaps that more under the current structure is too much. And if you look at the multipliers, the pricing ratios in the current rate structure, that is a pretty steep climb from 1 to 1.3 to 1.85. That's a very steep climb. So we asked Raftales to dive into that and actually look, instead of at a pricing ratio, looking at peaking factors. And I don't want to dive too long into a rant about what a peaking factor is, but essentially a person who uses a lot of water on a periodic basis puts a greater burden on the system overall, because the system has to be set to provide that higher amount of water, even though it's only part of the time. Whereas if those users who are consistently using less don't put as strong of a burden on the system. And that drives higher costs. So there should be some higher costs placed on the very higher users. So we asked Raftales to really look into the peaking factors. What are the actual costs? And so what we found was the data supports very significantly flattening out the tier rate. And we found that the data showed that the higher end users have been, for the past 2 years, actually subsidizing the middle, paying more than what the actual cost to deliver that water is, because we had that dial turned up too high, and the middle ground was enjoying some of that benefit. Especially users like myself who have non-potable irrigation and don't experience those peaks in the summer. So essentially, Jim was subsidizing some of my water bill. And so we wanted to address that. Our recommendation is to eliminate a tier level, widen the middle tier. So the tier 1 is, we still have 3 tiers because we no longer have any guaranteed usage built into the base. The base goes significantly down. The previous base was $55 almost. We're proposing a base of roughly 22 here. So a significant decrease in the base fee, but now no water usage is included in that. The first 1,000 gallons is at a rate of $13.73 essentially. And you may see different rates when staff and the consultant actually present to you with actual rates proposed, but these were the examples we were working with. And those peaking factors have the second tier at only a 1.12 factor and the third tier at a 1.2 factor. And that third tier doesn't kick in until 35,000 gallons. So essentially what the committee recommended is we have tiers that are, tier 1 is kind of an indoor usage. This is what a family, say, in a condo would probably use. Tier 2 is that outdoor usage during the summer months when you're irrigating, washing cars, things like that. That's the water you're likely to be using there, above 5,000 gallons. And then tier 3, and this was very controversial in the committee. There were enough of us that felt there does need to be a certain level at which usage is just considered to be excessive, and there needs to be a higher rate kick in as a signal that this is perhaps usage that you maybe need to address in modifying your landscaping or whatnot. But rather than that kicking in at 20,000 gallons, we recommend that it kicks in at 35,000 gallons. So it's really raising that ceiling so that those, we have a significant number of properties where people moved in here in the 90s or so, where developers under the old rate structure that was very broken at that time, but people didn't realize it, built large lots with high water usage landscapes. And now we have a significant number of people that are stuck trying to maintain these properties. This helps bring some of those into that middle structure rather than always being in the top tier. So it will lower some of those really extremes that we've seen in the news and we hear people complain about. It does increase, I think you'll see the average that middle tier is going to be paying, as opposed to what the tier 2 was paying before. But again, that is taking the appropriate peaking factors, the appropriate cost of actually delivering that water to those customers and applying that rate, whereas those customers were enjoying a little bit of subsidization before. The unfortunate fact is that's where most users are probably going to fall. And so you may hear some complaints of, well, actually water rates went up for me, and they will go up for me. But the committee feels that this is a more fair approach and a more approach that's more closely grounded in real costs. Anything I missed, Jim?
No, you pretty well nailed it.
And you said you had something closing you
Yeah,
wanted?
I've got a closing statement here real quick. Says, I want to emphasize the collaborative efforts of the Residents Advisory Group and the importance of this final piece. Together, we've clarified the difference between necessary and required water use versus what might have been considered excessive or wasteful. We've worked towards a fair and balanced rate structure, even though there were concessions along the way on both sides. We think this is fair for today. And more importantly, one that can be revisited and improved in the future for Wellington as it grows. For many residents, especially those with larger lots, multiple generations underneath one roof, or younger families, using the 25 to 35,000 gallons in the summer is not wasteful. It is simply what is required to maintain their property, meet normal household needs, and preserve the pride of ownership. But beyond that, it's critical to recognize the town of Wellington must ensure a safe, reliable, and affordable source of raw water. And no matter how much the Wellington residents can serve, if we cannot secure a sustainable and cost-effective raw water supply, our community will continue to face residential financial challenges that will compound year after year. And unless this issue is addressed head-on, those escalating costs will be passed directly to the residents, as they have been in the past, whether we want them to be or not. This responsibility with our town rests squarely on the shoulders of our town leadership, and that would be the Board of Trustees sitting in front of me this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Trustee Teets?
If we have questions or
Yeah, you can ask questions about their how they met, how they came up with it for sure.
perfect. So one of my first clarifiers, I need to ask Megan really quick. When we add ADUs to single family home lots, will they be using the same tap as the original home, or are the ADUs being required to have their own meter? Sorry,
I'm just going to say that's a question that is more appropriate for staff.
that's what I just asked
Okay.
Megan. Yeah, because that goes where I'm going to ask my next.
Currently, it would be the existing meter.
Okay, perfect. So that stems back to, for clarifiers, you were saying that the higher tiers were subsidizing the middle class users. what would you say statistically when you guys were looking at numbers? How many of those people that fell into that, give me the second so I can get the tier, between that 3,000, the 5,000 to 25,000, would you say were like single family housing units?
Have those
We
numbers
don't
off
have
the
those
top of my
numbers,
head.
no.
What was the, I'm sorry.
So how many homes in that reside kind of in that 5,000 to 25,000 gallon usage? How many would you say are most likely single family homes?
Well, we have, there in the presentation that you see next, there's a slide in there that breaks up how many accounts are single family residential. Well,
More
So we
for the
can-
Next section.
yeah.
Want to bring that back, trustee Keys, to the next section?
Well,
95% are single family residential.
There you go.
Okay.
95% of all accounts in town are single family residential.
perfect. So when you guys say that Jim was subsidizing your bill, I'm concerned that if we were not to adopt something along the rate structure recommended, would that mean that your bill would possibly also be increasing with the added ADUs with that meter or that water not being metered?
So the water would be metered.
No, but it would be metered through the single family, so it would increase that middle user. Does that mean that someone, Jim, like you, would possibly be paying even more when ADUs start being built on properties?
Yeah, what is ADU?
An accessory dwelling unit.
Like-
Mother-in-law house in your backyard.
Well, I would say yes, but you wouldn't put one of those in my yard. trust me.
No, but I know people will build them. What I'm concerned about is what impact that might have on those higher end users.
Well,
if-
it's a number game. It's gonna go up, right?
Okay,
It's obvious.
Got it.
More usage,
I mean,
higher rates.
If you're looking for our opinion from the committee, yes. Yes, it would likely, it could push that property into that upper tier, I would think. And that would be up to that homeowner to factor that into their decision of whether to build that or not and how to manage it, who's paying what portion of the bill.
The only thing I would say in that case is that typically you're removing irrigated turf perpetually. So you're gonna reduce summer peak demand probably for forever, while also increasing fractionally a base demand through 12 months of the year. That's generally the impact of water use from an ADU on a single family lot. So you reduce summertime peaking, and then there's a slight increase in annual demand, an annual base flow.
got it. So it could keep that number maybe a little higher, but just pretty much steady because you're removing a section of the property that you'd see in peak usage. So you probably wouldn't see them go into that higher tier, which means very well that you could be subsidizing even more of those costs.
In that example, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Trustee Wiegand?
I appreciate what you guys have done. You've looked at this mess that we got now, very realistic, and you've been talking with our other residents. So I think that's bringing a lot of transparency to it. So really appreciate the work you've done. As far as, the mess that we got, our water department, our town is doing a lot of different things right now. And, took us a while to get into it, and it's going to take us a little while to get out of it, but I think we're headed in the right direction. That's one thing that the board has been talking about, alternatives and stuff like that. So, this is a temporary thing. Well, I shouldn't say temporary. I mean, the rates are going to be varying all the time, but hopefully we're going to be looking at some different approaches where we can get our water supply in a lot better situation. So I know that's one of the things that you were concerned, and that's one of the things that the residents out there have been talking to you about and very concerned about. So again, really appreciate what you've done and how seriously you've taken what you've done. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Daly?
I want to thank you so much. You guys did bring some perspective we haven't heard before, and I really appreciate that. So some of the ways that you looked at this, between your objectives and the solution that you came up with in the model, there are some pieces in there that we hadn't considered before. It's a new way to look at it. I really appreciate that you guys have taken so much time and effort to put so much work into and develop a structure for us to consider. So thank you so much for doing that. It really helps to have you guys putting in that hard work. So we take it very seriously, and I really appreciate your recommendations.
Oh, Trustee Ken.
I just want to echo what's been said that, we appreciate so much the RAG group getting together and meeting as often as you did. This is a tough subject. A lot of people don't understand what it takes to put water into people's homes and how much it costs. And when I met you outside, I made a comment that you see part of the water equation that not everybody gets to see. And I am grateful for your dedication. I'm grateful for the way you've stayed at this and thought outside of the box to bring in more of a true cost. Pay for the water you use instead of subsidizing others. I like this structure, and I appreciate all you've done. Thank you.
No, again, just big thank you to you guys. I don't think I've got any questions about the proposed rates as far as that goes. I do have some input as far as, well, just input, I suppose. But if we're just looking for questions at the moment, I don't want to.
See what you got.
Okay, well, we'll roll right into it then. Ms. Clerk, can you promote me to a presenter?
Oh, is this related to RAG or for town?
It's rate structure.
Okay.
So, I mean, residential rate structure specifically.
Trustee Mason, can I ask if it would be informed to go through the remaining portion of the presentation this evening before diving in, or is what you have maybe separate from what's coming next?
It's a little column A, column B. I basically extrapolated out all these numbers in a spreadsheet as far and bar graphs and these types of things. I was just kind of display what the difference is between the current rate structure and the proposed rate structure would be as far as that goes.
And there is some of that coming in the next presentation, but maybe not to the detail that you have. So
and that's totally fine. I'm happy to wait on it. That's totally fine. So let's maybe clear through the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's wise. Okay. Thank you for doing that.
Trustee, may I make just a couple of comments?
Yes,
closing
yeah,
comments?
by all means.
There's just a couple of things I wanted to get on the record here, and I know trustees, you are all very well aware of it, but just for the benefit of our fellow citizens who may be listening online, we recognize that, as has already been recognized, raw water supply is a huge factor in the driving costs here. This is not inefficient or ineffective operation of the system. The system is being operated well. We need to cover the costs of it, and the raw water costs are just astronomical. And I understand the town is pursuing some other options. Hopefully that will come to fruition sometime in the next decade. Who knows? Also wanted to address, I think there may be people out there who have expected to hear some addressing of non-potable users versus potable users here. Other than organically addressing that in the cost of actually providing the water you're using, we made no attempt to try and have the town address any equity issues there, because the town is not providing non-potable water to anybody. Those are individual private organizations who have built systems on their own accord. And yeah, they do impact the usage patterns in the system and the rates that those people are paying for their overall water usage. Speaking for myself personally, not on behalf of the committee, it's no different than buying into a neighborhood that has a swimming pool for the use of their residents versus a neighborhood that doesn't. So I just wanted to address those couple things on the record, that the committee did not delve specifically into trying to make any shifts there.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to thank you guys for all the hard work that you put in, the extra hours, having those meetings on Saturdays. you care for this town, and that shows. We're not up here making decisions lightly by any way, shape, or form. So I really thank you for your guys' input and putting this together for us. And just time away from your families or loved ones, things of that nature, to do this for the town as a non-elected citizen is pretty sweet. So thank you guys for that. I appreciate it. Yes, Mr. Gator.
Sorry, I didn't put this in the presentation. One of the other conversations we had was about timing of implementation. Because one of the options presented to the rate advisory group was to delay implementation 1 or 2 years. We did push back, and this was one of the things we all agreed on, was that because right now our lowest end users, right, so that's senior that lives at home that uses 1,000 gallons, those veterans that don't use much water are currently subsidizing the middle tier, and that high tier is subsidizing the middle tier. So this goes back to Trustee Teets's question. If we delay the implementation of a change for 1 year or 2 years, we will continue to have that subsidization effect. So you'll have the lowest end and the highest end users subsidizing the users in the middle. The other thing, if you're making a decision, obviously at the end of the day, it's your decision as a board, but if you are making a decision based on the rate advisory group input, it's best to actually use that input when it was given, because 1 year or 2 years from now, the situation might be completely different. So if you're implementing something that was recommended 2 years ago, 2 years down the road, it may or may not be the same. We tried to come up with, by pushing it to the cost of delivering water, something that doesn't need to be constantly changed, because that was one of the concerns that was brought up. When you actually look at the cost of what it takes to deliver the water, and you have it as simply as Raptalis was able to put it, that's something that it only shifts when your cost of providing water shift. So it's a very sustainable structure.
Thank you. Maybe some clarity to that 2-year marker too. The intention is all to do it in April with the normal historical rate changes. So yeah, there was no intention to push it for those 2 years.
I think he's talking about the presentation staff's bringing up to us next. Because there is looking at
Oh.
extending it out.
Oh, okay.
Just presenting options.
Oh, okay. Well,
It's the same option we were presented. So I just wanted to give you our pick because I forgot to put it in the.
thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, we will bring up staff now. I thank you, gentlemen. And then the gals that couldn't make it this evening for your time.
I need to get into it.
Have you joined?
I have joined.
Can you? Oh, I
She's
see.
got that quicker. Oh.
Elise can click her, or yeah, that actually then Todd can work his on. Is that top already?
Yes.
He's had some minor just for animations purposes. So it's a live PowerPoint as opposed to. Yeah. He is joined.
There we go.
Sorry. Thank you. Perfect. So as he's logging in, I'm going to introduce, thank you, Mayor and Trustees, Megan Smith, Deputy Director of Public Works. Once again, here we go again. This is the third or fourth time that I've been part of these rate discussions with the town of Wellington. Again, we have Raptalis with us. Just as a reminder, we contracted with Raptalis in March of this year and really kicked off in May on this project. I know we did a lot of patting on the back, but I really want to take an opportunity again to be on the record to say how appreciative I am, staff is, to the work that the rate advisory group put in this effort. I have never in my 20 years of working both consulting and municipal land seen an advisory group, a non-elected citizen advisory group tackling a really hard topic, work together that collaboratively and well, and listen to each other and accept influence from each other and make space for each other. It was really impressive because it's a really important topic, and everybody that volunteered for this and that participated came at it from a point of view representative of what they've experienced and their immediate neighbors and loved ones and others in the community, and they took it very seriously. And again, to take the time to meet outside on their own time, in addition to the hours that they spent with staff and Raptalis, was very commendable and very impressive. So thank you all again. And this was, multiple, not to diminish any of the advisory groups that we have had as part of the rate process setting in the past. But this one was extra collaborative and special, of course, Jen. But extra collaborative. It was very impressive. So with that, we do have a lengthy presentation that we're going to try and get through. I think we'll take some well-timed pauses to maybe ask questions. So if we can sort of collect them a little bit at a time, and then we'll stop and ask some questions along the way, as opposed to asking to wait all the way to the end because it is a lot. But maybe if we can collect them and not necessarily interject in the middle. And I'm going to turn this over. You all know Todd Cristiano with Raftelis, Elise Ritchie down at the end. This is their second time working with the town on these efforts. Once again, they dove in and have done an incredible job. And I'm going to let Todd take it away and jump in.
Excellent. Thank you, Megan. Mayor, trustees, my name is Todd Cristiano. It's a pleasure to be back here again to talk about water, wastewater, and stormwater rates. As you've seen, we went through obviously a very lengthy process, and my presentation tonight really summarizes kind of the back office work that we did in terms of financial planning and all the analysis we did and the results from that. So that's the reason for the lengthy part of the presentation. And I'll pause at different points to make sure that we can get some questions answered for you. You can see we've got a lengthy agenda here. Obviously, some of these are quick. Our study goals and objectives, what the rate study process is. The financial plan results, that was not within the purview of the advisory group. That was just working on this with staff, the financial plan, 5-year financial plan. I'll talk more about the cost service analysis, although Greg hit a lot of it on point, so we probably don't have much to say on that. Then we'll talk about the rate structure alternatives and their impacts to compare to existing bills as well as peer utilities around the area. So what we're looking for tonight is some discussion and feedback on the proposed five-year financial plan and the revenue adjustments we've proposed for that to help meet annual revenue requirements or expenditures and fund the capital improvement program and operations and expenses and that sort of thing. And obviously, we're looking for some feedback on the rate structure alternatives, the ones that the RAG proposed as well. Why do we do rate studies? We want to make sure we ensure financial sustainability. We want to make sure we promote equity and fairness. This gets back to the discussion of high users subsidizing low users, commercial customers subsidizing residential users, and that sort of thing. And this also supports long-term planning. The hope is with a solid financial plan and a solid rate structure that you should be able to continue that on for a number of years without having to do a deep dive every single year. And that's really the goal why we're here is to help you do that. So we'd love to come back year after year, but we realize that maybe looking at it on a multi-year basis might be better. So we know there's obviously a lot of pressures facing utilities today, inflationary. We've got stringent regulatory requirements, especially on wastewater and stormwater. And let's face it, rate increase fatigue. I'm working with a number of utilities in Colorado, and we see a lot of head shaking in those meetings as well. Issues with climate shift and just the way storms are and some of the weather patterns here are causing some uncertainty. Borrowing terms on revenue bonds and state loans, those interest rates are going up. To couple that with inflationary pressures on capital projects, and just the increasing need for repair and replacement on existing infrastructure. And this is happening across the country, especially in Colorado. It's affecting everybody. Wellington's not unique in that area. It's affecting everybody. This is a quick graph here, maybe familiar with the Consumer Price Index, which is just basically measures inflation of the basket of goods of inflation. And within that basket of goods, they actually measure nationwide water and sewer bills as part of that basket. And this graph here shows the darker line there is the annual inflation index over a period of time. It's been relatively flat, as we know, for a number of years, about a decade or so. But you can see the dotted line represents the change in water and sewer bills over that same time. So it's really indicating that the time has come for a major repair and replacements with utilities across the U.S. So it just goes to show that, again, this is affecting utilities, not just the United States, but it's also in Colorado. So we have the study objectives here. We want to make sure we meet our revenues and expenditures. We want to be able to implement a capital improvement program to maintain the level of service for each utility. We certainly don't want, we want to minimize main breaks or both on the water and sewer side or any sort of flooding from the stormwater side. We obviously want to maintain our target reserve levels or ending balance, that needed buffer we need in case there's an emergency that we had not planned for, obviously. And designing the rates to meet the community objectives. And those are the community objectives we outlined with the rate advisory group. We went through what each one of those meant, and we looked at which was most important to the town of Wellington, and we helped design the rates around those objectives. Now, we know that there's no silver bullet rate structure. And we know that some of these objectives can be competing. When you talk about maybe revenue stability, that means a high fixed charge. But if you want an affordability, they kind of clash with one another. Or if you want a stable revenue stream that, or conservation that comes at the expense of maybe a stable revenue stream. So you have to find that balance. And that's what we did. We looked at a number of alternatives over several meetings to look at, how that all balanced, especially with the equity between low and high users and the customer classes as well. One thing that was very important too was the ease of administration and customer understanding. The town needs to be able to explain this easily to its customers. And we think about the field service crew who goes out and read the meters and are interacting with the customer. They're kind of the front line with the customer. If they can't explain it, then maybe it's not going to be understood by the customer. So we have to take those things into account as well. So the rate study process is we look at your financial plan to determine what amount of revenue is required to meet your annual expenditures. And again, that's O&M, that's salaries and wages, materials, supplies, any sort of debt service you have on existing bonds or proposed bonds, and obviously your capital projects. So we look at that financial plan, do many iterations to come up with those revenue adjustments we need to be. Cost of services, again, is what Greg was talking about, looking at that maintaining equity between the customer classes to make sure the residential class is not subsidizing commercial is not subsidizing multifamily and irrigation, so on and so forth. That's called interclass equity, the fancy term for maintaining the equity between the classes. Rate design, are we meeting our community objectives, and are we meeting the objective of having the high volume customers subsidizing the low volume customers, or intra-class equity? Again, we looked at that again with all of our rate structure alternatives. And finally, tap fees. We're not talking about tap fees tonight, but we are going to be bringing that back to you in January with our tap fee analysis for both water and wastewater.
And stormwater.
And stormwater, yes. So when we look at a financial plan, we have a couple of steps here. We look at projecting your rate revenues. We take all of your billing data and project that over the next 5 years. Any sort of other miscellaneous revenues, turn-on, turn-offs, hydrant fees, that sort of thing. And then we project your operating expenses, your growth-related projects, your repair and replacement projects, debt service. We consider under the umbrella of your reserve levels, making sure you're meeting your reserve targets. But even more importantly is coverage ratios. When you issue debt, there's something called debt service coverage that you need to meet. Bondholders want to make sure they're getting paid. So it's important that we maintain those ratios. So we do a lot of iterations to come up with the best mix of annual revenue adjustments and bond issues and timing of capital improvements. And it's actually a very iterative process. It takes a lot of different scenarios to go through to find that optimal mix. So we developed a multi-year financial plan from that. So the question is, we talk about this term cost of service. And it's like, well, how do we get from your budget to all these class costs? Well, there's a number of steps we go through. I won't go into too much detail, but there's a process in which we take all the costs from your budget and we assign them to various facilities in the system, because it costs money to operate and maintain a storage tank. It costs money to operate and maintain your transmission and distribution system, the water plant, the customer billing system, any sort of general administration type things. And when we put those in the buckets, we also know that those facilities are also designed to meet certain types of demand. Storage meets fire flow or meets peak hour demands. Water treatment plants are designed to meet peak day demands. And we also know that customers have average day demands and peak day demands. So we can kind of proportion out those costs to those customer classes. So basically, the cost service tells us how much revenue we need to recover from each customer class. And it's based on this principle of cost causation, which is this whole analysis of looking what buckets the costs go into and then how we allocate it to the customer classes, proportionality or equity, as we want to call it. It recognizes the different demand characteristics of customer classes. So if you think about a residential customer class, not a lot of water usage in the wintertime. There's more water usage in the summertime, the kind of that bell-shaped curve. You think about irrigation is even more pronounced because there's no irrigation, there's no water usage in the wintertime. And what we have to look at is what's the cost of this different type of demand placed on the system? And that's really what drives the different costs between the customer classes is based on how they place demands on the system, because how they place demands on the system incurs a different cost to serve them. And as a result, the cost to provide service varies by customer class, hence the reason we have different rate structures for the different customer classes, or at least different numbers in them. So I'm going to pause right there. To see if there's any questions about the financial plan or the introduction to the cost service, because after this, we're going to talk more about the real numbers and that sort of thing.
I do have a question.
Sure.
So going through this information, was all of this information also presented to RAG?
Yes, in much more detail.
Perfect.
Yes. So as we get to the rate structure here and the cost service rate design portion of it, just want to highlight that there are two components to a rate structure, the fixed charge of the service or base charge, and that's how much water, base charge, regardless of how much you use, except for in your current rate structure, there is a volume allowance in there. And then there's a second component, which is the volume rate structure. So we're still maintaining a two-part structure. We're not changing any of that. Just wanted to set the stage. So now let's go dive into the financial plan results of both the water, wastewater, and storm drainage utility. We have a graph here. We have the top graph, which is our revenues and expenditures, and we have these bars, and each one of these bars have different colors on them. Those represent the expenditures we're going to see over the course of the 5-year study period. The black line there represents the revenue that we need to recover in order to fund all of those annual expenditures. You can see that the dotted line there is the if we did not have the revenue adjustment. So it's just kind of a comparison there for context. And you can see that when the bars are above the black line, that means we are drawing down reserves to help meet our expenditures, meaning we're taking money from the bank to help fund our annual expenditures. When the line is above the bar, it means we're adding back into our reserves or our savings account. And you can see it kind of bounces around each year. So that brings me down to the next chart there. We have our ending balance and target reserves. You can see that our target reserves is the black line there. It remains pretty steady throughout the study period. And we start drawing down on our reserves beginning in 2028-29, meaning that if we wanted to maintain the same amount of ending balance, we would have had much higher rate increases. But we're drawing down the reserves and using those reserves to help buy down those rate increases to lessen the impact on customer bills. And that's the goal when we talked about that scenario analysis. Well, how do we want to draw down cash? Do we want to draw down cash in certain years? And it's just that balance. So when we look at what the results are, the first row here is the rate revenue increases each year. We have 0% for 2026 and 2027, followed by 3% in 2028 through 2030. Our ending balance there, you can see what the ending balance is, and that's in millions of dollars. Our target reserve is about $1.5 million through the study period. So we have unrestricted reserves that we could buy rate increases down with in the future, and that's $2.95 million in 2026. That represents the funds we have above the target reserve. That debt service coverage item I mentioned earlier, we are meeting the targets there for the debt service coverage. The current loans you have right now require a 1.1 debt service coverage ratio. So we are more than ample, our coverage is more than ample for the study period on water. Okay, let's move to wastewater. And I wish there was a way to, there we go. Trying to find a way to move that. Okay, here's wastewater. We have the revenues and expenditures again. You can see that the black line there represents the revenues with the proposed revenue adjustments included, whereas the dotted line represents the revenue without the revenue adjustments. There's a bit more of a spread than in the water utility. Again, we have the bars here, multicolored bars for each year. We can see that the black line of the revenues are just below. We're drawing down some reserves over the study period. And that's shown here in the bottom graph here. We have a ending fund balance of $2.5 million. We are drawing down those reserves in the first 3 years. And we have a $2.7 million bump in 2029, and we're drawing down those reserves again in 2030. We are drawing down the reserves because the wastewater utility is facing a much higher revenue adjustment than water, and we have the reserves available. Let's draw those down to the extent possible without going below our target ratios. And so as a result, our rate revenue increase in 2026 is 18%, but then that decreases to 10%, then 8%, then 3% in 2029, and 3% in 2030. And you can see our ending balance is drawing down through 2028, and then jumps up back in 2029, and then jumps down again in 2030. And I'm going to look to Elise, what was the cause for that bump up in 2029?
29. That is a good question. I think it's just it's a smaller capital year, so we go
Okay.
from spending 1.2 million in 2028 to just below $1 million in 2029 to
Excellent.
almost 3 million.
Thank you. And you can see by the 2030, we have our ending balance just meets our target reserve. So we have drawn down our funds to help buy down the rate increases by the end of 2030. We've got a financially healthy utility. We're able to fund those capital projects, and we're able to meet our debt service coverage by then. We are a little bit below that debt service coverage, but I know that Megan and Nick have been talking with the state on addressing that issue. Finally, storm drainage. Again, we have these 3 bars, and we're all looking to that large capital item in 2030, and that is the Clark Reservoir dredging. It's a cash-funded project, very large. The reason you don't see other large capital expenditures in this year is because what this graph is showing is net of bond-funded projects. We have an anticipated bond issue of $5 million and a couple of years of projects that are around $1.3 million each year. So we've just netted that out. And what you're seeing here is just cash-funded projects only. That project in the last year, the dredging project, is going to be cash funded as well. So that's the reason for that jump. And when we look at the drainage utility, the residential bill impacts, there's 2 components to the storm drainage bill right now. Obviously, the town of Wellington's portion to recover their cost, but there's also the portion of the Box Elder Basin Regional Stormwater Authority. And that is going away at the end of 2026 proposed. And so right now, with those 2 components, customers are paying $11.33 in 2025. They'll pay approximately $12.58 in 2026. It goes away, but the bill will still stay about the same. It'll go up to $15. And that's really needed to help fund those capital projects and help pay for that bond issue that's going to be used to fund those regional capital projects. And then after 2028, we see some incremental increases of 3% per year.
So let's pause right there for
Yeah.
just a quick moment. So related to the Box Elder Stormwater Authority, there's a lot of moving parts there. I'm sure most of you are aware that there are conversations happening around all entities involved in that authority looking to be able to close, with some hoping as soon as 2026. A lot of varying, there's a lot of players at that table with a lot of legal teams each and a lot of financial considerations each. So this modeling effort does reflect today. The model was built with the assumption of the authority closing in 2026. This model, as all models that Reftelis produces for us and turns over to us, is easily modified and can be updated as we learn more throughout the course of 2026. And we would come back and reflect that with the board at that time. So just wanted you to know that 2026, we're assuming, all things will stay the same. The authority charges will stay the same. Those charges are passed through. We don't keep any of that money. It goes right on to them. And then there's this proposal that when essentially in staff's recommendation with Reftelis and an ability to try and keep the most stable impacts to residential, or rather to utility customer bills, it would be proposing that at the time that the authority closes, that the rates generally don't change, but the revenue from all of the rates then would come to the town in order to offset the costs of a significant amount of stormwater projects that have not been captured over the years in town. Okay.
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 All right, so that's the financial plan for the water, wastewater, stormwater. Let's talk cost of service. The financial plan summary, again, no revenue adjustments for 2 years in water, and then we have inflationary adjustments. We have those proposed revenue increases of 18%, 10%, 8%, then 3% as well. And obviously, there'll be continued discussions on the capital improvements and rates because with the stormwater, there are a recent stormwater master plan, so there's a number of projects there, and obviously there's subject to shifting and changing over the next year or so. Water rate structure alternatives. Okay. One thing we want to consider here is we talked about pricing objectives, and Greg pointed on this as well. But these are the kind of the community values we wanted to reflect in your rate structure. Cost recovery between classes and the cost recovery between low and high users, and a wise use of water conservation, tier structures, and then the ease of administration and customer understanding. So we have some considerations for the board. We have the proposed rate advisory group structure. And the question is, do we implement the change in the structure for water in 2026, or do we hold the current rate structure in 2026 and 27, implement the new structure in 2028? And the major difference is that if you implement the advisory group rate structure in 2026, there is no revenue adjustment, but people would see a change in their bill. And that's just one thing to consider. It's not good or bad. It's just how it is with the rate structure change. Or if you move that to 2028, you can make that adjustment with the rate structure change. You're still going to recover the same amount of revenue each of those years, so there's not any issue associated with that. Or the other option is saying we don't want to do any of that. We want to retain the existing structure as it is and just move forward from here. So those are kind of the 2.5, 3 alternatives we have. So again, we implement that in 2026 and hold off till 2028 with the other rate increase of 3%. Now, when we do that in 2028, based on the change of the structure, the tier threshold, the price ratios, and what we're recovering in the fixed charge, although it's a 3% revenue adjustment, customers' bills could go up higher than 3%, or they might go down below 3% to all be above zero, but percent increase. So there's something else to consider, that there's going to be bill impacts, and that whenever you have a changeover in a rate structure, you're going to have that kind of wonky distribution of bill increases at different levels, just not a 3%. And again, retaining the existing rate structure is an alternative as well. Some context here. This is the water system customer breakdown in terms of accounts and revenue by class. Residential is by far the largest. Multifamily has 1% of the accounts, or about, I think, 48 accounts. Irrigation, about 100 or so, and commercial, about 230 customer accounts. When you come to look at the revenue by class, the commercial revenue is a little bit more than the number of accounts, and that's just because they have higher usage per customer. Usage per account is greater than just the number of accounts they have, than the residential use per account. So just to provide some context of how the rate structures kind of work with this sort of breakdown of accounts by class and usage and revenue by class. So we'll look at the existing and proposed advisory group recommended rates for single unit residential. These are just one dwelling unit on a property. Current rate structure is $54.81, and that includes the volume allowance of 3,000 gallons. And the tier 1 is 0 to 3,000 gallons, and that is in the base rate, including the base rate. Tier 2 is 3 to 7,000 at $12.90. 7,000 to 20,000 at $6.76, and that tier above 20,000 is $23.86. The rate advisory group's recommendation is we're dropping the minimum allowance, so that's going to drop down the base charge. And now we're charging for all usage. So if you use 1,000 gallons, you're paying for it. And that is $13.73 from 0 to 5,000 gallons. So we've kind of extended the band there on the tier one usage. And that really recognizes pretty much indoor usage, essential water usage. Tier two, we're going from 5 to 35. That captures a majority of the outdoor usage. And then above 35,000 gallons at $21.46, that's a very small percentage of usage. So a majority of the customers are going to be sitting within that tier one and tier two thresholds there. And you can notice that, again, we've the $21.70, because we've taken out the minimum allowance, that's gone down. So let's look at a couple of typical bills. We have low volume users of, oh yes, question.
Explain what
Yeah.
your note on a portion of the RAG recommended that free rate revenue dedicated to water acquisition.
Yes, so, and I'll let Megan clarify that. We included additional costs for customers that hit this top tier, because those are the very few, very high users, that we are going to recover some of the cost or some of the dollars within that 2146. We're going to set aside for raw water acquisition in the future. I'll let Megan go into detail on that.
And so this is the, so if you can think back to the slide within the advisory group's presentation where they showed the peaking factors, and on that one rate tier, so that tier 3, the peaking factor showed as 1.2 plus $5 per 1,000 gallons. And essentially it is that $5 per 1,000 gallons additional that is being applied to that per 1,000 gallon charge in that tier that would be utilized. So it is in excess of what is required revenue to meet operation and capital, and it is instead would be applied to the raw water fund for additional raw water acquisition. Essentially, kind of our first step towards this idea of what eventually would lead to what is the word I'm trying to say? When you have a water budget, like a per property water budget based on overall dedication at the original dedication. This is this effort that if you're using 35,000 gallons in the summertime and you add all that up over the course of the year, it is very likely that you're exceeding the volume of water that was dedicated at the time of build for your home. And we need to be able to recover that because it's very, very expensive to do so. And so we need to be able to go out and buy more water in order to cover that usage. That's what that piece is about. You're welcome. And again, as we move into the next slide, you'll see how minimal that really is.
We have a bill comparison here for different levels of consumption. Obviously, 2,000 gallons, so that lower water usage. With under the existing rate structure, it would be $55 per bill. With the RAG advisory group's rate structure change, it would be $49. And again, this is revenue neutral. We're not adding a revenue adjustment because it's going to be 2026, and that's what we're looking at here. Average usage, 5,000 gallons usage, $81 existing. That would go to $90. And that gets really to the balancing out of the higher water user bills, the lower water bills under the existing structure, and kind of balancing that a little bit more. So when we get to the 15,000 gallons, you can see that the spread is less, $240 versus $245, a $5 difference. And then when we get to this top 1% of bills, the bill would actually be lower for that 25,000 gallons. Again, this is just after the first year change. After you go from there, everybody's going to go up at the same percentage increase. So it's just this 1 year change that you're going to see this dichotomy between the bill changes and the different levels of consumption.
I have one question for you,
Yeah.
but in doing this, this would ensure that everyone is paying for what they're actually using.
Yes.
Got it.
So, and just really briefly to get at, and because there's a lot of data captured in this slide, that above there's an ellipse, it's not an ellipses, I don't know what that bracket.
Yeah.
Thank you. That identifies the percentage of all annual bills at that volume usage. So it's not cumulative. It's not like up to 2,000 and then between 2,000 and 5,000. It is just representing, just to give an indicator, of how many bills are issued in a year's time. So that's not number of customers, it's number of bills that are generated by the town in a year that use 2,000 gallons, that have used 5,000, 15,000, 25,000. That's why those percentages do not add up to 100, if anybody tried.
And provide some additional context.
Okay.
Provide some additional context. Approximately 70% of all bills are 5,000 gallons or less. Not 70% of customers, because customers have all sorts of bills, but if you look at all the total bills, about 70% of them are 5,000 gallons or less. Following on that with multi-unit residential, again, similar results as to the single unit. Right now, the base rate is $34.13, and that includes 3,000 gallons of usage. Tier 2 is 3,000 to 5,000 gallons at $7.80. 5,000 to 14,000 gallons is $10.15, and over 14,000 gallons is $14.46, and that's per unit. So if you have a duplex, that first tier is 0 to 6,000, so on and so forth. And we retain that part of the structure as well. We have gotten rid of the minimum volume allowance, hence the reason the base charge has gone down to $9.47. We've reduced it to 2 tiers. There's just not a lot of usage above 14,000, between 5 and 14, above 14. If you think about a multifamily complex or an apartment building, just not a lot of usage there. So we just reduced that to the 2 tiers. Commercial, the base charge based on meter size. So as your meter size increases, your service charge or your base rate will increase as well. There's no volume allowance in the service charge for commercial. Currently, it's a tiered structure, 0 to 25,000, 25 to 120, and greater than 120. And this was determined back in the 2002 advisory group. And we reviewed this again. And with commercial, it's very difficult to have a tiered structure because you think about the diversity of customers within commercial. You've got a car wash, you got a bookstore, you've got a brewery. What's the right threshold break for that? And it's really challenging. You could break up your commercial class into different brackets of types of customers by SIC codes or something, but now we're looking at a lot of different rate structures, and that's not easy to administer. And may not provide really any bang for the buck, right?
We had a lot of discussion on that
yes.
topic, as a matter of fact.
So we're proposing a uniform rate structure. It's very common with utilities just because you have just that mix of customers in there. And typically residential customers don't tend to place the same types of peaks in aggregate on the system as maybe residential does. They're more uniform in their usage patterns. Of course, there are some commercial customers that do, place higher demands on the system at certain times. But when you look at the overall, it's pretty flat. So we went with the uniform rate structure there of $14.18. Irrigation, same story here. My service charge is base rate is based on meter size, and it increases as the meter size increases. And we had winter and summer before, but I think 1% water usage in the winter. So it really didn't make much sense to have a winter rate when there was just no water usage there. In some communities in Colorado, there still is some water usage in those shoulder months. So, but here it just was pretty clear that the demand there was virtually zero in the winter months. So went to a uniform rate, $15.58, and that's down from the $19.81 previously. So again, here was the issues with the commercial rate structure, the inequities with the tiers. And what we've got here, this is part of the advisory group's recommendations as well. For the irrigation, same story. This was part of the advisory group's recommendation to go to a uniform rate structure. There are some challenges with billing with the winter and summer rates. So this will improve the ease of administration for Nick here and others. Now we get down to the nitty gritty here. This is what everyone wants to see, is the bill comparison against other peer utilities. We have to keep in mind that this is just one data point. There's several things to consider in terms of where the utility gets their water source. Are they operating off wells and surface water? Do they purchase their water? Where are they in their capital improvements? Are they highly leveraged with debt? All sorts of things that are behind these typical bills you need to consider. So this is just one data point, but it is important to show this in terms of all else being equal, how does the town of Wellington compare with its peers? And you can see that under the current rate, we are at $80.61. The proposed is also at $80.61 under the retaining the current structure. And the advisory group recommendation would be up to $90.48. And again, that's due to the shift in where we're recovering the costs between the higher and lower users there. And again, this is 2025 for Wellington and everybody else, and 2026 proposed. We don't know what's happening with Milliken or Eaton or Johnstown. A lot of them do have revenue adjustments on the books, I'm sure. So we'll have to wait and see what this looks like at the beginning of the year if those get any of those get adopted.
Just for example, I do know Johnstown's 5,000 gallon per month use will be closer to $80+ in 2026. So theirs is going up pretty significantly.
I'll pause for the water on the rate structures. I know that was a big component of the advisory group, looking at all those different rate structures. So I'll pause to see if there's any questions about our analysis.
No.
Moving right along. Wastewater is a little easier. We only have basically one rate structure for everybody here. Monthly base fee is $15.38. One of the options is let's do just an across the board. We don't have to change the rate structure. We'll just take it times the 18% and we'll call it good. Or we have the cost service, the recommendation of $15.25 for a base rate. The volumetric rates are the same for single family and multifamily. And that is because when we look at the type of contributed wastewater flow to the treatment plant, they're very similar in concentration of the wastewater constituents that are in wastewater. So that's why they're the same rate. We get to commercial, and we didn't get a chance to get into this in the last study, but we did develop high strength or strength-based rates, which accounts for different levels of concentration of bioorganic material in the wastewater. So the higher strength, the more stuff you have in the wastewater, the more it costs to treat it. So we have these different low strength, medium strength, and high strength bands for customers. And the low strength is $10.18 per 1,000 gallons. Medium strength is $12.76. High strength is $20.46. Low strength is like office buildings and that sort of thing. Medium strength might be a restaurant or a car wash or something. And high strength or maybe a brewery or something where there's just a lot of activity going on with the contributed wastewater flow to the plant. And we worked with staff to help categorize your customers into these various groups. And there's ongoing work with how that's going to be rolled out. And a lot of utilities have these strength-based customer rates. This is not anything unique to the town. And it is a way to better balance the equity between customer classes, just like the high and lower use, high strength, lower strength customers, same concept. And so typical monthly bills here, single unit residential, the existing bill is $51, and across the board increase of the 18% will get us to $60. But with the advisory group recommendation, that base rate's a little bit lower. And for 4,000 gallons, that would go down to $57 versus the 60 for the across the board. The low strength commercial, we're going to see a decrease with the advisory group recommendation because now we have this low strength rate, and it is lower than just the average rate for single family and multifamily. And again, the multi-unit residential, we see a slight decrease with the advisory group recommendation over the across the board proposal as well. Survey again for just wastewater bills here. Again, Wellington sorts at the top here, but like I said earlier, we don't know where the other is going to fall at the beginning of the year. But you know, we might see some movement on this graph for these other things. And I'll pause there real quick before we get into the last part, which is drainage. We've got 2 minutes.
You're doing excellent.
Okay.
Outstanding.
I respect everyone's time. Drainage rates.
Trustee Cannon, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, not a question, just an observation. I do like the strength rates for commercial users because I know the impacts of a high strength, high BODs and the cost it takes at the wastewater plant to clean that up and to cart away the waste and everything else. So that's a good way to address those type of users. And yes, unfortunately, the breweries tend to have a little bit more higher strength than a car wash. Those detergents tend to be more biodegradable as opposed to, removing alcohol and grains and whatnot. So
We just wanted to,
thank you for keeping that in consideration.
absolutely, we want to make sure that what we're doing in the water utility in terms of equity, we try to capture that over on the wastewater side. Drainage, Megan talked about the two different components of the rate structure, the drainage free for the stormwater utility. We saw what those rates were on that previous slide. We have this master plan that was completed in 2023, hence the reason for some of these robust capital projects over the next 5 years. We've looked to sunset that Box Elder Basin Authority fee and replace that with a full town of Wellington fee, which is somewhat close to what town residents are paying now with that. So here's what the rate structure would look like over the 5-year study period. The residential right now is $11.33. It would go up to $12.58 in 2026. The authority fee goes away, but we retain that revenue to help fund those capital projects, pay that debt service on the bond issue, and help fund that the dredging project in 2030 as well. And they remain the same for multi-unit and commercial. Is slightly different. It's based on lot size. Is that correct? Yeah, based on lot size. A slightly smaller survey for stormwater. Not all utilities have a stormwater. Not all cities have a stormwater utility. We are at the higher end of the chart here, but again, we don't know where this is going to go with some other stormwater utilities for next year. So that comes down to these questions and feedback from the board. Rate structure. So we have the rate structure alternatives. One is adopt the advisory group's rate structure for 2026, or wait till 2028 and retain the existing structure for the next 2 years with a 0% increase. Or just say, hey, we're going to just keep the existing rate structure altogether through 2030. Wastewater across the board, or the advisory group recommendation. Remember, the advisory group recommendation did have that lower base charge, and it does have those high strength surcharges in there as well. And the wastewater rate structure of folding in the payment that's going away into the fee for the town of Wellington to recover to fund O&M and capital projects. So those are the 3 questions we've posed for the board today.
Well done. At this point, we're definitely interested in hearing dialogue, fielding questions, taking a beating. I don't know. No, none of that. Okay.
You want to start? I guess.
It's hard to keep it to yourself there, Trustee Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Clerk, can you promote me to panelist, please?
Thinking very hard.
Yeah, it's correct. So yes, let's do it.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything yet. I literally made it last night. So I do apologize for that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Clerk.
And I amended it and sent you something back in email.
I saw that, but I'm going to make a point to
Sure,
that
that's fine.
also. We'll get there. We'll get there. Let's see.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Okay, so
our fault.
There you go.
okay. So I do want to be very clear. I am certainly not opposed to anything that the rate advisory group's done. You guys have done a heck of a job on this, and I certainly don't mean to diminish anything, but I think for everybody here, just so that we kind of get a visualization of things, would be important for us to do that, just so everybody kind of understands where we're at. So basically what I did was I broke out, and very specifically, this is for single family residential only. It does not have anything to do with water, wastewater, stormwater. Oh, did it not go? Let me try it again. Let me try it again here. Okay. Okay. So let me get this thing out of the way here so I can see. Okay. So essentially what we're looking at, and I'm happy to provide this spreadsheet to anybody that might want it. Essentially, it's really easy to use. You can plug in volume, tier rates, base rates, what those rates go up to, is that sort of thing. But basically what we're looking at here, and the reason why I've set it up for this visualization tonight is to see where that cutoff point for the current rates versus the proposed rates under where users might see an increase versus a decrease. So essentially what we're looking at here is under the current rates, with the exception of, and let me maybe just add that in really quick. Oops. Okay, so on the right side of the graph here, we see that under the current rates, anything from 1,000 to 2,000 gallons would in fact go down under the proposed rate structure. Anything above from 3,000 to 19,000 gallons would in fact go up. So any user that would be above 20,000 gallons would see a decrease. But I want to be very clear about what we're looking at here. I basically took this chart as well, which is what was presented to the rate advisory group as far as total number of bills over the course of a year. So there are 48,660 bills that are issued out to customers each year. This is for single family residential only. It does not include multifamily. I extrapolated that out, and I apologize, Megan, I didn't go grab the numbers from you explicitly, but these are the numbers that would be tied to each of these, right? So if I'm looking at 3,000 gallons, right, that's about 7,800. And so if we look at, that's that number right there. So I've gone and extrapolated those numbers out for each of these. So essentially what we're looking at, just to high level perspective, 66% of bills that are issued currently in town would in fact see an increase under the new rate structure. 30.8% of bills that are from 0 to 2,000 gallons, primarily your wintertime users, would in fact see a decrease. And your users that are over 19,000 gallons, about 3% of the population would see a decrease. Now, those numbers, if you plug some of these things into that, oops, I can't, why is this not letting me? Is it going to let me? Can't move this Zoom thing. How do I get this out of the way? There we go. If you plug those in, so for example, 19,000 gallons, you're seeing about the same. You could kick that up to, 25,000 gallons. You're going to see what the number decrease there would be. But anyway, this table's fully live, so you can manipulate it in any way you want. But point being, 66% of users would in fact see a increase.
Bill.
Now, my
66% of bills.
bills, that's correct.
Issued.
Yes, to be clear. So I think what I would, again, I'm not necessarily opposed to the new rate structure, but I think, frankly, and obviously we have to meet revenue requirements. That's the name of the game here, right? That's the name of the game. So frankly, what I would propose, as long as it meets revenue requirements, I think what I would like to see is the current rate structure under tier 3 be increased from 20,000 gallons at the top end to something like 25 or 30,000 gallons. That would provide relief for some of those higher end users, and it would also not increase bills for customers that are for that 66% of bills. Just something to consider. I'm not saying, I also did want to highlight a number of other things. We had a comment tonight about non-potable users and that sort of thing. I do want to be clear, non-potable users have paid for access to the well with the cost of their home. So to be clear, they have paid for that. So that's as far as the non-pot stuff goes. And then I also want to mention that, well, I think that's it, really, frankly. So my proposal would be to increase that high end of tier 3 and leave the rest of the rate structure, frankly, mostly how it is.
Just to clarify, when you say tier 3 to 25,000 and then keep tier 4, keep a fourth tier?
Yeah, correct. So tier 3 would go up to like 25 or 30, and then tier 4 would be on top of that 25 or 30. if that makes sense. And again, if anybody wants this table, I'm happy to provide it to them. So.
Quick question, Trustee Mason, or Pro Tem. You're saying everybody's going to be seeing that increase through that one, the middle tier, right? Do you got a percentage of what that would be? over
Anybody
what
that
currently
is using, but
Is it like 2 or 3% or? Right.
of it? Well, so it
didn't look like it
obviously
was
depends on how many thousand
much.
gallons you're using, but so for example, if you were using 7,000, right, 85% of our residents use 7,000
Right,
gallons
that's-
per month per year on average. The increase at 7,000 gallons would go from 106.41 to 121.21.
Okay, so what's that amount percentage wise?
You want to do some
Yeah.
quick math on it? Sure.
Right, just curious. Should be very minimal.
There you go.
Oh,
So
no, yeah, I don't think that's right.
14%.
14%.
Oh, it is
Yeah, thank
14.
you. So so again, while I certainly appreciate the work that the advisory group's doing, if we modify the structure in terms of what the proposed structure will be, at your average water user level, you'd be seeing a 14% increase. And I can't get behind that, frankly. I would much rather see us, like I said, increase that tier 3 amount up, as long as we can get it to meet revenue requirements. Trustees. I'll stop sharing too, sorry.
So, and I know and thank you for the presentation. Also, I apologize earlier. I had a chance to thank all of our rate advisor group outside, but I didn't have a chance to say it in public. So I want to say thank you in recording. My thing is I have been one of those ones that have known and identified through another resident years and years ago. And it's one of the reasons I ran for my position I did, is the realization that for a long extended period of time, residents were subsidizing other taps, and I had an issue with it. And it was a very large amount, and that has decreased since I have been a trustee. My goal has always been and always will be, and which is why I actually support what has been presented from the rate advisory group, is people pay their own way. I get it that we decrease that 30, decrease that 35,000 to something else, but that still doesn't cover that bottom end where most of those low income seniors are. So what happens is you have to look at it as you pay to play. So this is one of the things that we did ask of the rate advisory group, was to ensure that you're paying for what you use. And looking at the numbers and seeing it come back across. And yes, I agree. I know there's going to be some increases. Do I think it's fair? It might not be, but it wasn't fair for many years when other people were also subsidizing, and it bothered me then. So I can't sit back and say that if someone sees a 14% increase in their bill, yes, it's wonky. It happened for a few years, but then I would be backpedaling on what I said many years ago, where it's not fair for other people to be paying for these costs of service. That's not actually their cost of service. They're not using that amount of water. So I fully support what the rate advisory group has presented. I like the generalized idea of the commercial, the low, medium, and high impact users. I did like that suggestion because it is the realization that a salon is not going to have the same impact as a brewery. A restaurant is not going to have the same impact as a brewery or a high water user. So I am in support of what the rate advisory group has presented. I do not want to pass this off for an additional 2 years and tell those higher end users that, you know what, you're going to have to cover those costs for an additional 2 years. I don't think that's fair. It's made it our attention. We're aware that you guys are subsidizing another tier rate. It's our responsibility to correct it and say, we are aware of these numbers and we need to adjust it because that is a fiscal responsibility of ours. When we become aware of this, you need to fix it. So that's my suggestion and recommendation. I'm comfortable with what's been presented.
Thank you. Thank you again to everyone who participated in the RAG. Thank you, Raftelis staff. This has been an eye-opening presentation. I tend to agree that we need to follow the recommendations from the rate advisory group. And Mayor Pro Tem, I appreciate the work you did on the grass and so forth like that, but this is brand new to me. So I'm not exactly sure if it's correct. I'm probably sure it is, but I know that this group has been working for 4 or 5 months to come up with some plans, and I tend to follow what the appointed group is recommending for us, and even for the stormwater. There was some questions. Tonight's not the time for that, but I have some questions about the stormwater since I was so intimately involved with the Box Elder Regional Stormwater Authority and also the latest amendment to that agreement. So I have some questions about that because there was always a plan that once the authority ended, that those rates would continue on, but I think they had to call it something else at that point. Anyway, but that's for another conversation. But I do appreciate all the work by the rate advisory group. I don't believe waiting 2 years is going to be beneficial. I'd rather get people paying for the cost of the water that they use right away. Thank you.
Trustee Wiegand, thank you.
My question goes back to Mayor Pro Tem. Does the 14% increase, does that factor in sewer and drainage?
No,
I was looking at,
that's single unit residential water usage only.
okay, I'm just a little confused because what I was seeing on the graph that you had posted, it's very minimal on that. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong one. But we had it where you had it, this current rate at 17,000 gallons, $274. And the proposed would be 275.51. Am I misreading that?
That was 17,000 gallons at 7,000 gallons.
Okay, but
It
I'm
would go
looking
from-
at 17,000.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Right.
if you're looking at 17K, it would go from 274 to 275. The cutoff is really 18,000 gallons. It's roughly the same, 290
Right.
for
And I know,
both rates.
right, most of our people are most concerned about the water in the summertime when we're at high usage too. So I just wanted to get that.
If it helps put things into perspective, if you were a very high user at 35,000 gallons, let's say, under the current rates, you're paying $682.19. The proposed rates, you'd be paying $553. Now, again, the current rate $682.19. If you were to modify the tiers, like I had mentioned, and you bumped that tier 3 up to 30, it would bring that number down to $611.19. So I do think there's, again, if we could fit it into revenue requirements, I think that's it. It not only incentivizes our high users to still try to use less, because that's technically, well, yeah, that's a high number, but 611 versus 553 is at, is $50 at 35,000 gallons versus, what you would have been paying 682.
Mhm.
So and I'm happy to, if you want to see that offline or whatnot, obviously we have to make a recommendation.
Right now, I am for the RAG, what they have recommended so far.
And then
Across the board.
Things I admire about the proposed changes, the ones from the advisory board, I want to list those first. And these are concerns that have been brought up to us in the past from resident feedback is there's been a couple of scenarios that aren't really acknowledged in our current rate structure. That is, you have a vacant home, right, that is using zero water. And right now they are being, I'm talking about water usage, single family right now, just to be super simple, right? Same idea would apply to multifamily, but just a lower base rate. But so right now, if somebody was not using any water in their home at all, they would still be liable for $54.81 of water, a water base rate water bill, versus someone who has a vacant home. And I'm not, the percentage of these users, the percentage of these bills is going to be small, but these are scenarios that have come up. So I just want to acknowledge them. So versus someone who has a vacant home, right, under the new proposed rates, they would only be paying $21.70 per month. So talking about affordability and paying for what you're using, if you're not using anything, the proposed rates are definitely beneficial to you to have a lower base rate. And then I looked at my bill because, you know, I can relate this to my usage, right? And I understand my patterns. I am someone who uses potable water for irrigation. So I'm kind of like not by volume, like how many people live in my home, but by the patterns of summer irrigation. I definitely qualify for that. So I can use that, my example, and it gives me a pretty good idea of what people might see when it comes to the summer months, higher usage for irrigation. So I'm looking at mine. The majority of half of my year, I use less than 3,000 gallons at my home. So under the proposed plans, I would save money some months and I would pay a little bit more in other months for half the year, just based off that. The other months are kind of related to that irrigation time, in which my bill, which would still put me as like a moderate user though, not high by any means, because I'm really careful about my irrigation. Well, I could be better, but I don't excessively do a lot of irrigation, and that would increase my bill 4% or 2% on those any summer months that are larger watering amounts. So I see some months, in my case, based on the new proposed rates, being impacted plus, some being impacted minus when it comes to rates. So it's not set across the board like just that overall everybody pays 3% more kind of concept, but I see benefits, and I see, you know, some months I pay more, that I use more water, so it makes sense. But what I do see a huge advantage of is people who are incredibly being careful with the water usage, or who are only using inside water usage, which is a lot of our customers when it comes to anybody who has non-pot systems or smaller households, or really they're just using less water. And those really minimal users, they will save money compared to what our current rates are. So I see that benefit for sure. Now, is that the majority of our bills? No, it's not. So we got to consider that. So if 5,000 gallons, which was mentioned, that what 70% of our bills are 5,000 gallons or less when it comes to water. Did I understand that correctly? Okay. Yeah. So at that rate, the 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, those rates go up pretty significantly, up to 15% higher than they are right now. But the 2 and 1 and 0, those go down. So I understand the objectives and what was trying to be accomplished. I just see that a lot of bills would go up based on certain usage rates. So, but other ones would go down. So I think what I want to do, and I think what Dave brought up, which is super beneficial, is based off, you know, what recommendations we're doing tonight, is see a whole bill. Because it doesn't matter if we say we're decreasing your water bill by this percentage at this usage, but when it's all comes as one bill is when it's going to be either a shock or a relief, or it's going to seem okay to our users. Because we might be talking about raising it $2 here, but then drainage is more dollars, and sewage is more dollars. So once you put it all in one view, in one bill, that's what's important to our users, right? They're not going to be looking as closely as we are, obviously. So that total amount is what's going to be hitting their pocketbook. So I just want to be sure, and we've always done this in the past, so I have no doubts that we won't continue doing this, but just really looking at that, the proposal for all of them, all of it together in one bill, and what that overall change might be. And I like seeing it at those common bills that we would receive. So in the way I'd want to see it too, I know we define it by specific classes, but I would also like to break it out additionally for non-pot and pot users. So seeing an example of what a regular customer who uses potable water for irrigation, what happens to their bill over the entire year. And what that number, that total dollar that goes out of their pockets for this utility payment across the entire year, what that looks like.
So you're
So
looking for an average, for an annual impact.
an annual impact.
Annual impact.
Yeah.
So,
Especially since we're offering, that kind of budget billing where they can make their payment consistent. So I really want to see the overall cost for, the most common type bills that people would receive for a non-pot irrigation versus potable irrigation, because this does impact those users differently. Obviously, the way that the new rates are proposed, it does have a significantly different change for potable versus non-potable. So for example, in my mind, most of the people who are on non-pot irrigation systems will see more significant increase. That's what I would imagine I would see in that over the yearly basis. And those are the folks who are not using more water in the summer necessarily for irrigation purposes. So that, now, is that fair or not? I don't know. That's, that's the question here. What's fair? What's the right way to do it? So I'd like to see that for single family, pot versus non-pot, yearly impact, multifamily. And I understand the sewer, these are all for proposed rates. That's what I want to see for proposed for water rates. Oh, and all of them, actually, all the proposed rates together for the total package there. Regarding sewer, for the 3 different levels, it makes sense in my mind of what the cost is to treat that. I also know that some of those numbers are 100% increase for usage. So that is a substantial change that a business might face. So I see both sides of that. I see that as it costs more to process this water. That makes sense. But I also see surprise, your 1,000 gallons costs double what it used to. So that will be a significant change for somebody. I'd like to see what that looks like too. So I want to see it at the different levels of there. And I'd like to have a better idea of what's within each of those classifications, what we would expect for types of businesses. We have so few businesses or commercial water compared to residential. So the people who will be impacted will be it'll be just them on their own with a significant change. So I'd just like to understand that at those different classifications. So I'd like to see all the proposed stuff together, yearly impact with those things that I mentioned.
Okay.
Mm.
I mean, I could go either way, with keeping them where they're at or going with the rack. I think that whatever we do, obviously we need to address it, in April. We're not waiting for years to address anything. Yeah, I mean, Mr. Stonestacker, he said himself, he understands that his bill will go up.
my bill will go up.
Yeah.
And
And I mean, the biggest thing here, right, is 61% of the bills will see an increase, right? A pretty substantial, more or less, until we see more numbers, right? Theoretically speaking. And with that, we're gonna have a lot more upset citizens, residents. Something to think about. But I'm open to either. I would like to see pretty much everything that you discussed. I want to see the total increase altogether on a bill, what that looks like. I mean, I know my bill automatically is going to increase, and I'm on non-pot. Or no, I'm on potable water with irrigation and everything. So yeah. Yeah, Trustee Gator, you had a question?
Nothing to you anymore, sir.
Oh,
I just wanted to, so you guys are having a great conversation, and I want you to understand, we had the same conversation. Megan did bring up to us that a lot of bills would go up and the percentage was high. The issue for us came back to is, if we look back at the values that we based on, was cost recovery between the high and low users. And the reason that differential is there is because on the low end and on the high end, the middle end is getting subsidized. And so I think 201 of us, everyone across the rate advisory group, was going to see our bills go up. So we all said we think that we should, knowing that our personal bills will go up because to some level, some high months, some low months, we're getting subsidized. And while yes, there might be some bills that go up, there will also be bills that go down. The issue that comes in is if you adjust, and I love your idea, Trustee Mason, that if you could just raise the bar, the issue is the revenue requirement under current rates assumes that lower bar. So if you raise that bar, you now have to recapture that revenue somewhere else, which means you've got to change out, which I think Todd told us that. And so anytime you change one number, it changes everything else. So just keep that in mind. But we did have the same, and we basically said that's a decision you as leaders are going to have to make. But what we tried to do was give you a baseline of, this is based off recovering the cost to deliver the water. So even if there is an adjustment this year, it's like, hey, we know that everyone is being billed based on the cost it takes us as the town to deliver that 1,000 gallons to your house, to your business, to your multifamily. And I think most people will understand that. And when you have the bills going up, the bills most of the time that we're seeing on social media and going to the news are the $700, the $800 water bills. It's not usually my bill went from 110 to 117. Yes, it's a large percentage, but it was $7. Most people aren't going to see that. Now they are calling Nick, but I think it's usually the people where they're like, hey, my bill went from $300 to $400. They're calling Nick and saying, what is going on here? Right. So just something to keep in mind. But we did have this discussion, and ultimately for us, it came back to what is the value of, are we equally distributing the cost where it belongs?
thank you. Mr. Stonecipher.
I'm going to echo a little bit of that, but a little bit different. I want to acknowledge a few things. One is the pain that I know the staff must be feeling in looking at a revenue neutral year where we could be messaging out, your rates are not increasing. Nothing's changing. That's an opportunity missed if we implement changes. The committee recognizes that. I personally, as a utility manager myself, recognize that pain. I really would like to be able to message that out. But the upper end users are paying more than their fair share right now. And I think, Mayor Pro Tem, I think your numbers are dead on. We fully recognize 60-some% of the bills will increase under this. And with that knowledge, again, me being one of them that's going to see a pretty significant increase. I'm probably in that spot where the increase is going to be the most significant, that 4,000 or 5,000 gallon range. We still, as a committee, wholeheartedly, and me personally, wholeheartedly make this recommendation to you.
Thank you. Clear enough direction?
Can I ask to add just a little bit of historical context that everybody that is in this room already knows because they've been along for the ride, but to make sure that folks that may be listening at home don't misunderstand a lot of the words that have been, the word subsidy has been thrown around a lot this evening. And so I want to take an opportunity to remind the board, the pricing objectives that were utilized in 2022 that were presented by the rate structure, the resident rate structure roundtable. There's a lot of R's that year. One of the prioritized pricing objectives at that time was essential water use pricing, with the goal of providing the lowest cost possible to the base level of water use for all of our customers in town. That pricing objective was also adopted by the Board of Trustees at that time. And when we as staff and Raftellus came to the Board of Trustees at the beginning, when we kicked off this project and we're asking about pricing objectives to carry through to the next rate structure roundtable, that was again highlighted as one of as a key pricing objectives to maintain. So when we consider that, or just the language around 1 and 2,000 gallon or low end users are subsidizing the middle or what have you, I do want to remind that it's not inappropriate to have water included in your volume-based structure. It's not against the law. It's not, I just don't, there's just been a lot of language about like the rates were wrong and we've now discovered that they were inappropriately charged or something like that. That's absolutely not the case. When we made a decision about the rate structure that is currently in place right now, it was 100% above board. There was a significant amount of empirical, our data that went behind it. It was set up with specific goals in mind. And it's absolutely fine that those goals can change, and those goals can result in a rate structure change that would then, have the potential to impact bills in very different ways. But I do just want to kind of just get that grounding on the record, so folks that maybe are listening from home that maybe weren't here or part of this process or watching us closely in 2022 don't have the impression that the rates that we're currently have in place are in some way either ill-conceived, not legally appropriate, not considered in a full picture when they were adopted at that time in 2022. That was all.
Yes, a couple of quick questions. Do you have any idea what the total bill, including the sewer, the drainage, all that, for like normal usages over in our area, would probably be about 15,000 per gallon? What would that be an increase if you factored in?
Normal usage in the summer
in the summer,
15,000 gallons of water.
Right. And just so, our residents would have an idea, is it going to go up 5%, 10%, 2%? So we can budget better is I think what most people want to know.
So you're looking to have cumulative
Right.
utility
Everything
bill
together.
representation.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
we can develop.
We can build that, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
Right.
Absolutely.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, dovetailing off of Pete's comments, we also want to make the point that this committee is not throwing the previous committee under the bus. There are members of this committee that were on the previous committee and made those recommendations. We have more data now to work with. We saw the impacts of the previous, and again, as I pointed out in the presentation, some of the actual impacts we saw were counter to what our goals were, what we thought we were doing at the time, and we've learned from that. So we're not throwing the previous committee under the bus. We're just learning from the past 2 years of data.
Thank you for that.
One more comment.
Sure.
And I wanted to stem off of that statement and saying specifically having so many of the members who have served previously on these rate advisory groups, it is one of the reasons I am super confident with their rate advisory recommendations is because I'd say 50% of the members have served previously on rate advisory, if not more. So it's for 4 people, correct?
2 of 6.
Okay. So
We
is
also
Lisa
have a
Cholet.
trustee, though, who was through the whole process
Okay,
as
is
well.
Lisa sitting on this one as well? Okay, so
And a former trustee.
And a
yes.
former trustee, which
So I'd like to interject one thing here. The rate structure is what it is, inflation is what it is. But as I said in my statement, we did what we could to give you what we think is correct and what we can mold off of. We are leaning on the town trustees to get the cost of the water. You get that under control, we won't worry about the total cost of our utility bill. We need to understand that.
We're working on that.
I know we're working on it, but you need to understand that, because we're worried about the total cost of the utility bill. That is the majority of the utility bill right there. So we get that dialed in, you continue working on it, these conversations will go away.
Yeah.
You empowered us, we did what we thought was correct. We elected you, you do what you think is right, and we move forward.
Thank you for that. Any,
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Megan, your comments. It's true. Changing the goals and the objectives can change the whole structure. It doesn't mean that one was bad or one was good or one's better than the other or so forth. But I do appreciate the fact that we do have more data. I think with that data and with the experience of working with Raftelis over a period of time and having similar groups like this, able to dial in what those goals and objectives are, gives us a better product. And again, Jim, thank you so much for your comments as well. We're working on getting those water costs under control, doing everything we can to find a more sustainable source of water, long-range solutions, but there's nothing we can do right at this moment. But we are working tirelessly on that. So thank you.
I just have a couple more comments.
Sure.
I appreciate when we lose that authority fee, that we're not dropping that from bills necessarily, but using that. So I want to acknowledge that, and I appreciate that. Also, the largest portion of your bill that you receive from Wellington, it has 3 things in it, right? Just for everybody who's on the phone potentially, but it's storm, sewer, and your water bills. 3 bills in one bill, plus an additional fee right now for a separate entity. But so since a major part of it is your water, that's why I think we're focused on that much, because that's the most significant portion of your bill is your water bill. So the proposed rates right now, based on a specific bill you receive on whatever time of year, it could be, based on this structure, 60% less for that water portion, or it could be 15% more. That's the range. And what the difference could be based on the new structure, and that's just for the water portion, it could either be 60% less, all the way ranging to 15% more. So that's why I think we really need to look at a whole year perspective and what most of our customers might see, because we have very significant, common usage of people, not very many people who have those extreme high usages by any means. So we really need to cater to and understand what the most people will be impacted by. So there's no way to say it's going to be a whatever percent increase. That's not the case. If it's a different structure, it could impact people differently based on how much they're using in any given month. So I think that's why we need to look at it further and really just see how the actual impact happens based on the rate. Because looking at it just from this perspective doesn't really tell you what's going to happen to your pocketbook and what your monthly fees are going to be necessarily. So that's why I'm glad we're going to continue diving into this.
I do have one minor niggle with what you said, right? Really what it is 30% of bills, the ones that are between 1 and 2,000 gallons, would go down. 66% of bills will go up.
You say that, but half of my month's bills would go down, me personally. So
That's just you personally. That's going off the 48,660 bills that we send out every year.
Right. So how much is the difference of the going down versus the going up? That's what I'm saying. Some of them will be down, some of them will be up. So over the entire year, what is that overall difference? Because if some of your months are down, some of them are up. That's why I really want to see where that lands.
Trustee Wiegand.
Last thing, I want to tell you guys, I really appreciate the work that you did on that in the advisory group. We got all facets of the residents making these recommendations, from non-pot to pot to high use to no use or whatever. And, they're making some hard decisions in their recommendations on this. And You know, this is our community. They've checked and they've talked with the residents around them. And so I think we're really getting a good feel for where we should go on this. So again, just want to let you guys know, I really appreciate the work you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
I just want to clarify one request then, because we do have the opportunity, we'll be back in front of you for another work session in January. I guess that's the third, fourth, whatever.
January 20th.
There you go. January 20th, for impact fees. I think it's possible we can develop some annualized bill impact information that we can bring to that and include in the packet ahead of time, so you would have it to see. So we can maybe wrap up that direction, because the impact fee discussion, I feel like, is going to be shorter.
Yep.
The rate advisory group didn't have input for the impact fee discussion. That's really capital and infrastructure based and based on expected growth and a variety of things like that. So we can definitely do that. I do need to understand, though, if what I'm hearing is, I believe I'm hearing a yes across the board on the proposed drainage fee town of Wellington portion increase. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, because if we're going to bring some iteration or some annualized impacts, if I'm just varying water, but if I'm varying 2 or 3 things, you can imagine it's three cubed in a hurry, or 3 to a factorial, whatever. Yeah. So we would have a big matrix. So I'm looking at just varying to show the impact between the rate advisory group's water recommended alternative structure against the existing rate structure for water, correct? And then, but we are bringing the proposed advisory group wastewater impact changes with the 18% increase needed to meet revenue sufficiency, right, for the financial plan, including the surcharge, the strength surcharges. That's the option. Okay. And then the stormwater increase of $1.25.
Yeah, in my impression, it was all in the annual view.
And
Yeah.
annualized.
But
Yep.
the goal was not necessarily to see current versus RAG in my idea for water. I want to see everything that exists right now to all the proposed potential changes.
Okay.
That way, we're really considering the overall impact on the bill.
Right.
So that's my impression.
Yeah.
of it.
So everything current today,
Yeah.
everything as proposed tomorrow.
Yeah. And for multiple range of users. So
Correct.
people who use pot for irrigation, those who use non-pot, multifamily, single, and commercial.
I think I got it.
Not too worried about irrigation personally.
All right.
And then just to let you know, we will be back on February 10th, will be the first presentation of the actual rate. So based on the guidance from tonight and from January, February 10th will be first presentation with public comment. And then it'll be presented again on February 24th, scheduled for consideration for adoption. Does need to be adopted by the beginning of at that meeting so that it can go into effect on April 1st. This does bring all of our rate adjustments at one time. So we would have the sewer rate, your wastewater rate be updated for your winter usage, which stems from your January, February, and your March water meter readings. Anyone that is on the equal payment program, their adjustment would happen in April as well. So at one time a year that the rates would change going forward.
And that there would, customers would see bill impacts only one time a year.
Yeah. Vitally important. Okay. Well, that's a wrap, folks.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the direction.